Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be looking at something. It's really cool, and it might just totally change how you think about learning languages. It's all about listening. We found this awesome YouTube video by Speak English Smartly, and it is chock full of great information about this. I'm
Yeah.
really excited to dig into it with you.
Yeah, it is really interesting how so many people, when they're learning a new language, they want to jump right into speaking. But the research actually shows that listening is like the real foundation to become fluent.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, it's like you can't really speak a language well if you don't get how it sounds first,
Right.
right? Like how people use it.
Exactly. And it's like more than just passively hearing words. Think about the difference between, hearing someone and truly listening to them. When you shift your focus and you really actively engage with those sounds and you're trying to understand the meaning, that's where the magic happens. That's where you really start to acquire the language.
So it's not just for babies then, like learning their first language. Active listening is something we need to be doing as language learners too.
Absolutely. And being actively engaged actually helps you build more than just comprehension. Think about a time when you really felt heard by someone. It creates a connection, right? That's because deep listening is also building emotional intelligence. And that plays a huge role in how we communicate and connect with others in any language.
Okay, that's really cool. I'm already starting to see how this goes way deeper than just memorizing vocab. The video also talks about how listening helps us learn vocabulary in a way more natural way than just using flashcards, which I've definitely been guilty of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're actually hearing those words being used in context, in real conversations. So instead of just knowing a definition, you start to pick up on the nuance, the tone, like the emotional weight that native speakers attach to those words. So the video gives these examples like, I'm absolutely thrilled, or it's a bit tricky.
Mm.
You're getting so much more information from that than just thrilled means happy, or tricky means difficult.
Yeah, it's like you're learning the personality of the words, not just the dictionary definition.
Precisely. It's so much richer and more immersive.
And speaking of immersive, it also extends to picking up grammar naturally.
Yeah.
Wait, are you saying we can learn grammar without studying all the rules and doing a bunch of exercises? That sounds too good to be true.
It might sound counterintuitive, but think about it. You didn't learn your native language by memorizing grammar rules, right?
It's true. I guess I just kind of picked it up by being around people who were speaking.
Exactly. It's like music. You don't need to understand every note and every chord to enjoy a melody. You learn that flow and the structure through repeated exposure. And the same goes for grammar. Hearing a phrase like, she has been working all day, helps you internalize the present perfect continuous tense without ever having to diagram a sentence.
So you're saying just listening to a lot of English, even if it's fast or I don't get everything, will actually help my brain start picking up the patterns.
That's exactly what the research says. And the more you listen, the better your brain gets at processing the language and doing it quickly and accurately.
So it's like a workout for your brain. The more you challenge it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly. It might feel kind of overwhelming at first, but with consistent exposure, you're going to start to notice that you're able to follow along way easier. Your brain is literally rewiring itself.
Wow, that's so cool. The video also mentions that listening is like having a built-in pronunciation coach. How does that work?
Well, when you listen closely to native speakers, you're subconsciously picking up on their stress, their intonation, and the way that they link sounds together, all those subtle things that make someone sound like a natural speaker.
So it's like osmosis for pronunciation.
Kind of, yeah. Think about how you can easily detect regional accents or dialects in your own native language just by listening. The same thing happens when you're learning a new language. By immersing yourself in authentic speech, you naturally absorb the nuances of pronunciation.
I guess that makes sense. So instead of focusing on perfectly pronouncing every word in isolation, it's more about getting a feel for the natural rhythm and flow of the language by listening to how native speakers actually use it.
Exactly. It's a way more organic and effective way to develop authentic sounding pronunciation. But there's an even deeper level to this, too.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The video mentions that listening helps us think in the target language without translating in our heads first. And I've always struggled with that. Do you have any tips for how to make that switch?
It's a common challenge, and it goes back to that idea of active listening. When you're translating everything in your head, you're creating this extra step in the process. You hear the words, you translate them to your native language, you think about the response in your native language, then translate back to English before you can speak. It's exhausting.
Yeah, no wonder I feel so mentally drained after speaking English for a while. So how do we break that translation habit and start thinking directly in English?
The key is to make those connections directly between the sound of the English word and the meaning, like completely bypassing your native language. It's like using a GPS. Instead of stopping all the time to check a paper map, direct listening is the GPS for your brain.
Okay, I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So how do we train our brains to do that?
Immersion is key. Surround yourself with as much English as possible. Podcasts, music, movies, audiobooks, and really focus on understanding the meaning directly from the sounds without translating.
That makes sense. It's like you're training your ear to recognize the patterns of the language.
Yeah.
And your brain to associate those patterns with meaning.
Exactly. And as you do that, as you build up those direct connections, you'll start to find that you naturally start thinking in English more and more.
That's awesome. The video also mentions that listening isn't just about words. It's also about understanding humor, politeness, and cultural cues, which seems really important, but also kind of tricky to learn.
It is tricky because it goes beyond the literal meaning of words. But it's also one of the most rewarding parts of language learning. Think about it. You can know the dictionary definition of a word, but when you understand how native speakers use it in different situations, with different inflections and tones, it reveals a whole new layer of meaning.
Can you give me an example of that?
Sure, think about a word like brilliant. In some contexts, it just means very bright or intelligent, but you might also hear someone say, that's brilliant, when they're excited about a new idea. And in that context, it means fantastic or amazing. Listening to real conversations helps you pick up on those subtle shades of meaning that a textbook just won't cover.
So you're not just learning the language, you're learning the culture too.
Exactly. And that's what makes listening so powerful. It helps you understand not just what people are saying, but what they mean, their intentions, their emotions.
And that makes you a way more effective communicator, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You can avoid those misinterpretations and those awkward faux pas, and you build stronger connections. Because you're speaking the language in a way that resonates with native speakers on a deeper level.
So it's about more than just getting the grammar and vocabulary right. It's about understanding that cultural context and the unspoken rules of communication.
Precisely. It's about becoming fluent in the whole culture, not just the language. And the best way to do that is by immersing yourself in authentic listening experiences.
And as the video says, it's important to make those listening experiences enjoyable. Otherwise, it's hard to stay motivated, right?
Absolutely. Find things that you love listening to, music, podcasts, audiobooks, movies. Learning becomes so natural and an enjoyable part of your life. You'll be making progress without even realizing it.
That's so important. I know for me, when I'm enjoying what I'm listening to, I can get lost in it for hours. But how can we make sure we're not just passively absorbing information? How can we make sure we're actively engaging with the material?
That's where the concept of active listening really comes in. And it's not just about language learning, it's a valuable skill for all areas of life.
So we've talked about active listening for language learning, but I'm really interested in this idea of it being helpful for all areas of life. How does that work? What does that actually look like?
Well, just think about a time you really felt heard and understood by someone. What were they doing? They were probably fully present in that moment, not distracted by their phone or other thoughts. They weren't interrupting or already thinking about what they were going to say before you'd even finish.
Oh, yeah. It's so easy to fall into those traps, though, especially when you're really excited about what you're talking about.
I know it is. It's natural. But resisting that urge is really important for active listening. It's about giving the other person that space to fully express themselves and to show that you actually care about what they're saying.
So it's more than just hearing the words. It's about being present and creating a space for that connection. What else can we do to become more active listeners?
Asking clarifying questions is a really good technique. It shows that you're really engaged and you're trying to understand their point of view, even if you don't agree with them.
Like you're saying, help me understand where you're coming from, instead of just waiting to talk.
Exactly. That kind of open and curious approach can really change conversation. It shifts from a debate or a competition into a collaborative thing where you're both exploring an idea and both feel heard and respected.
It makes me think, how many arguments could be avoided if we all just did that? If we all just tried to actively listen to each other more?
It would be huge, really a game changer. And not just for language learning, but for all our relationships, personal, professional, even with ourselves.
That's deep. It's by learning to listen to others, we learn to listen to ourselves more too.
That's it. It builds empathy and understanding, and that affects everything in our lives.
This has been amazing. We started out talking about listening for language learning, but we've covered so much more. How to communicate better, how to build stronger connections, even become more self-aware.
Yeah, it's amazing how much comes from simply opening our ears and listening when we do it with intention.
I love that. So to all our listeners out there, try to use some of these active listening tips in your daily life. You might be surprised at how much it changes things, not just with language learning, but in every part of your life.
And remember, language is so much more than just words. It's a tool for connecting with people in all the complexity of life.
Beautifully said. Okay, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, everyone, and keep listening. You never know what you might learn.